Students, in lesson 3.10, algebra, we are going to be focusing on the essential question, which is how can you use addition or subtraction to describe a pattern or create a sequence with decimals. And notice something that you should think about when you hear about sequence with decimals. We should think about the calendar at the back of our room. We started that on the first day of school, and as we've gone through, that numerical sequence has increased over time as we count up to the 100 days of school. So our lesson is going to be looking at patterns with decimals specifically. We're going to start with the real world, unlock the problem. A state park rents canoes for guests to use at the lake. It cost $5 to rent a canoe for 1 hour, $6.75 for 2 hours, $8.50 for 3 hours, and $10.25 for 4 hours. If this pattern continues, how much should it cost Jason to rent a canoe for 7 hours? So boys and girls, this is one of the vocab words that you should have made yourself note cards for at the beginning of chapter 3. A sequence is an ordered list of numbers. A term is each number in the sequence. So you can find a pattern in a sequence by comparing one term with the next term. So step 1, write the terms that we know in the sequence and then look for a pattern by finding the difference. And I'm going to subtract difference from one term to the next term in the sequence. When we hear the word difference, we know that is the answer in a subtraction problem. So what you'll notice here, boys and girls, is we wrote down what we knew. We labeled 1 hour, we gave $5. 2 hours, $6.75. $3, $8.50. $4 hours, $10.25. So what we can see is that between the first term and the second term, if we subtracted $6.75 from $5, we would get $1.75. So what we can see is, does that pattern continue? Is $8.50 minus $6.75 also $1.75? Yes, it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to put down plus $1.75 in the next box. Now we're going to go on to the last one. $10.25 minus $8.50. Is that also $1.75? Yes, that is $1.75. So when we find out the difference between the terms, we put it in the blue box. So we know that as this pattern increases, for every hour, if you add an additional hour, it's $1.75 to rent a canoe. So now, boys and girls, we're going to go on to step 2. So step 2 says, write a rule that describes the pattern in the sequence. So our rule, we could say, is simply add $1.75, because we saw that that's the pattern. And the reason why we got that is that was the difference between terms. Next, step 3, extend the sequence to solve the problem. So that means that we're going to keep using the sequence till we count up to 7 hours. So when we look at that, boys and girls, if we're going to subtract, we can also add. So if we add $1.75 to $10.25, we would get $12. If we add $1.75 to $12, we would get $13.75. If we add $1.75 to $13.75, we would get $15.50. So boys and girls, it should cost about $15.50 to rent a canoe for 7 hours. It says, what observation could you make about the pattern in the sequence that would help you write a rule? So what we could say is the terms, and remember again, if you're confused about the terms, I'm putting a green box about them. So the terms are increasing, meaning we're adding, right? So we can put in parentheses a plus sign, by a same amount, and sometimes we like to say a constant amount. So the rule has to include addition. Now, boys and girls, we're going to try another example of this problem, which is a little slightly different, but it's another strategy to solve the problem. And something that Claudia had brought up in class was, can we know the one strategy or two strategy? And, those are good strategies. If those are the ones that you feel comfortable with, you should use those strategies. However, it's never a bad idea to extend your knowledge by adding more items into your math toolbox. So on the next example, we're going to learn a new strategy. It says write a rule for the pattern in the sequence. Then find the unknown terms in the sequence. So let's look at the terms here. If it helps you to think about this as being money, absolutely use that. So what we can see is right off the back, we can see that the terms are decreasing. So if we see a decrease, boys and girls, we know a decrease means what operation? Subtraction. So we know that we're going to see that pattern. So when it says, look at the first few terms of the sequence, we look and we see 29 and 6/10, 28 and 3/10, 27, 25 and 7/10. So think, is the sequence increasing or decreasing? Well, we would circle decreasing, boys and girls. So now in step 2, we're going to write a rule that describes the pattern. So it says, what operation can use to describe a pattern that increases? Well, if there's an increase, meaning we're going to add, we would say it would be addition. When it says, what pattern describes a sequence that decrease, we should think subtraction. So when we think about this, are we going to want to use subtraction or addition for writing our rule here? For this, our purposes here, we're going to want to use subtraction. If we look at 29 and 6/10, and we subtract 28 and 3/10, we see 6 minus 3 is 3. 9 minus 8 is 1. Now I would go on and I would do it for the next term as well, just to make sure that the sequence is constant. Notice, boys and girls, I added a 0 in that place just for my brain visually, so I can make sure that I can do this. 3 minus 0 is 3. 8 minus 7 is 1. Again, we see that it's decreasing by 1 and 3/10. So the possible rule here would be to subtract 1 and 3/10. Now in step 3, it says, use your rule to find the unknown terms in the sequence above. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this last item that we had, and we are going to expand upon that. So if we start with the last item we had, I'm actually going to erase this in the section on the side, so we have a little bit more space to work. So hopefully you've taken notes about these items on the side. So now we're going to start with this number that we have, which was 25 and 7/10, and we know we're going to subtract our rule that we just created. So if we have 7 minus 3, boys and girls, so boys and girls, 7 minus 3 is 4, 5 minus 1 is 4, and we bring down the 2. So we know the next number in the sequence is 24 and 4/10. Again, we're going to subtract our rule from it. 4 minus 3 is 1. 4 minus 1 is 3. 2 minus nothing is 2. The next number in the sequence is 23 and 1/10. Finally, we subtract one more time our rule. Now we can't do 1 minus 3, so we're going to regroup, and that 3 is going to become a 2, and we're going to borrow 10, and now we have 11. 11 minus 3 would give us 8. 2 minus 1 is 1. Bring down the 2. We have 21 and 8/10. So notice, boys and girls, all we simply did was we plugged in our rule and we subtracted our rule from the previous term, and we got the next term in the sequence. Now we're going to try one more strategy. It says write a rule for the sequence and then find the unknown term. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here, and I'm going to ask myself the first question. Is this an increase or a decrease? As I go through, boys and girls, I see that the numbers are getting smaller. So I know that first this is a decrease. And I know that means that my rule must have subtraction in it. So my rule must have subtraction. So what I'm going to do is the terms that I do know, the first two terms, I'm going to look at them and I'm going to say to myself, I'm going to subtract those two because I want to figure out what the rule is. So I'm going to take 65 and 9/10, and I'm going to subtract 65 and 3/10. 9 minus 3, boys and girls, is going to give us 6/10. So let's see if 6/10 is our rule. Let's go to the next number in the sequence. So if we take this as our rule, we would say subtract 6/10. Remember, how did I get the rule? I took the first two terms in the sequence and I subtracted them and I found the difference, and the difference was the rule. So now we know that, boys and girls, we can take the next term in the sequence, which was 65 and 3/10, and we can subtract the rule from it, which was 6/10, and then we can figure out the next term in the sequence. Now we can't do 6/10 minus 3/10, so what we're going to do is we're going to regroup them ones, and we're going to do 13 minus 6, and that's going to give us 7/10. 4 minus 0 is 4, and then we get 64 and 7/10. So the next number in our sequence is 64 and 7/10. And notice, boys and girls, if you wanted to subtract 6/10 from this, you would indeed get 61 and 1/10. So now a different way to do this, boys and girls, is we're going to write the first four terms of the sequence. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the rule, which says start at this number, and we're going to add this. So right off the back, I'm going to write down that this is my rule, and then this is my first term. So this is going to be my first term. So if we take that and we apply it, we can figure out the next couple terms in the sequence. 5 plus 5 is 10. So we have 3 plus 1 is 4, plus 5 is 5/10. So our first term in the sequence was 35 hundredths. Now we have 50 hundredths. Now I'm going to take 50 hundredths, and I'm going to add my rule, which was 15 hundredths. My next term in the sequence is 65 hundredths. Next, boys and girls, we're going to go on to the last one, which was 65 hundredths. Again, I'm going to add my rule, which was 15 hundredths. We get 80 hundredths. So this lesson is really nice because it just works a lot with patterns, which is something that you're pretty good with. And I think that you'll be able to see that it follows a logical sequence and an order, which you'll be able to make sense of. So now, boys and girls, the last question that we have to answer together is, it says, explain how you know whether your rule for a sequence would involve addition or subtraction. And boys and girls, a quick thing that you could see is if the sequence, which are the terms, increases from one term to the next, you know that the rule uses addition. However, on the opposite side, if the sequence decreases from one term to the next, the rule uses subtraction. So hopefully that will be helpful in finding and understanding the patterns.